Hey there, guys. This is Cole. Welcome back to another movie review. As you can tell by the title of today's video, we are continuing on the Halloween horror movie reviews of season 1 for the episode of October, and this is episode 12. And today, I figured that the movie I'm going to be reviewing today is the 2010 creature feature movie Piranha 3D, directed by Alexandre Aja. So what is the plot synopsis to the creature feature movie Piranha 3D? The plot of the movie is as follows. After a sudden underwater tremor sets free scores of prehistoric man-eating fish, an unlikely group of strangers must band together to stop themselves from becoming fish food for the R. That's basically the plot synopsis to the movie. Now this movie was directed by a guy named Alexandre Aja, who I actually do rather like as a director. Prior to this, he directed a French horror film called High Tension, which I do like that movie. I'm just not a big fan of the ending, but he also directed the 2006 horror movie remake of The Hills Have Eyes. And me personally, I love The Hills Have Eyes from 2006. I think that is one of the best horror movie remakes of all time, and just one of my favorite horror movies of all time in general. He also directed a 2008 horror movie called Mirrors with Kiefer Sutherland, which, despite that movie's flaws, I do like that movie. And then many years later, he would go on to direct the 2019 killer alligator movie Crawl, which is a movie that I rather enjoy. In fact, I would like to review that for the October season. But so yeah, so how was this movie made? Well, because of the box office success that Alexandre Aja had with the 2006 Hills Have Eyes remake, he was hired to direct a remake of Piranha, which, if you don't know what Piranha is, the original Piranha movie was a B movie from the 1970s. It was essentially a Jaws ripoff, but instead of it being a shark, it's a whole bunch of piranhas, aka killer fish. And Spielberg said in his opinion it was the best Jaws ripoff, which I would disagree with. And Alexandre Aja wanted to have his own take on the story. And I will give credit, at least this movie doesn't just try to fully copy the original movie, but this movie, when it released in 2010, it received decently positive reviews from critics, but very mixed reactions from audience. As for my reaction to the movie, this movie's fine, but in my opinion, it is definitely a step down from some of the other movies Alexandre Aja has directed. And in my opinion, this started his decline as a director. Now, and this is probably my least favorite movie he's done. Again, I don't hate this movie. I don't think it's terrible, but definitely not what it could have been. But yeah. So the movie starts off where there is a boat fisher who is actually played by Richard Dreyfuss, who played Matt Hooper in the original Jaws, which is my favorite movie of all time. And during the beginning of the movie, this fisherman who is played by Richard Dreyfuss is basically fishing in the lake, but basically a bunch of piranhas, they basically create a whirlpool and the guy falls in and, well, he becomes fish food. And it's a pretty brutal movie. And one thing I will say about this movie I do like, even though there is a lot of bad CGI, there is practical effects in the movie. And when this movie does use practical effects, they are good. Like, I will give Alexandre Aja credit for that. And I also do think this movie does have some good music to it as well. And this movie does have a good cast. And I will say this movie does have a good cast. You got Elizabeth Sue as the main police detective. You got Ving Rhames in there. You got Adam Scott. So again, actors I do like. They do try their best with the material that they're given, and those three actors I thought were good in this movie. I thought they definitely were the highlight of the movie. But anyways, one thing comes to another. Like I said, the fisherman, is attacked by the piranhas at the beginning, and there's a police detective played by Elizabeth Sue who she works with Ving Rhames and Adam Scott to basically figure out what's going on, and they find the answer of what happened to the fisherman on the small little boat from at the beginning of the movie, and he did not make it, and he became fish food, to say the least. And the sheriff basically says we should probably close off the beaches for a few days just until we can get an autopsy report to see what happened and stuff like that. And Elizabeth Sue, the sheriff, she basically has a son of her own who is actually played by Stephen McQueen's son. And Stephen McQueen was in the original Blob movie, which, to be honest, I've never really been a big fan of the original Blob movie from the 80s. I meant not the original. I meant to say I've never been a big fan of the original Blob movie from the 1950s. I much prefer the 1988 Blob movie, but that's just me, with Kevin Dillon and Shawnee Smith. But that's just me. But anyways, this police sheriff, she has two younger kids, and the older kid, which is her son, played by Steve R. McQueen, and she basically wants him to babysit her kids while she's at work, which I'm like, okay. But again, like I said, this one of the biggest problems I have with this movie is, I mean, minus the exception of the character of police sheriff played by Elizabeth Sue, Adam Scott, and Ving Rhames, and another character we'll get to. Minus the exception of that, I didn't really think the characters were all that great in this movie. Especially the main son of the sheriff. Like, I thought that he was kind of an idiot with some of the choices he made. Like your mom, okay, the sheriff. She puts you in charge to basically watch these kids, but you're like, nope, I'm not gonna do that. Basically, like an irresponsible idiot. He basically tells the kids, oh, I'll pay you $40, go home and just stay at the house and stuff like that. But the kids, they don't make the smartest decision. They basically use a paddle boat to get to an island, and the paddle boat's left behind and stuff like that. And then the sheriff's little daughter is walking in the water. She accidentally steps on some glass, and there's some blood, and that attracts the piranhas, which are swimming up shore fast, but she gets on top of land before the piranhas can reach it and stuff like that. And then at about the 45-minute mark, about halfway through the movie, there's a whole scene where some of the police sheriffs are basically wearing these scuba gear suits. They're basically underwater and attacked by piranhas, and the whole scene where a guy uses like a dynamite flare, like underwater, basically uses a light flare to see what's going on, and like we see a whole bunch of piranhas staring at him. Despite the CGI not really being that good, it does make for a nice little visual. And then basically they're able to get one of the scuba divers up, but they see he was brutally attacked by the piranha, and then they basically get the piranha in a bucket, and they bring it to a guy named Mr. Goodman, who is actually played by Christopher Lloyd, who I do rather like as an actor, and Christopher Lloyd is one of my favorite actors of all time. He played Doc Brown in the Back to the Future movies, which are some of my favorite movies of all time. He was also in this movie. He also played the bad guy in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. So it's nice to see him in this movie, and he basically tells the police officers that this is impossible. It can't be. And he basically tells them that the piranha they brought in is a prehistoric species of piranha that vanished from the earth 2 million years ago, so he doesn't understand how it could still be alive. And he basically tells them, like, if there really are thousands of piranhas and you need to destroy them, it would have been best if you started yesterday. And another bit, now here's another example of a character being unlikable. For example, when Jake, which is the name of the teenager played by Steve R. McQueen, is on a boat, is on a boat with some people, and this is a movie that focuses on, this movie has a lot of nudity in it, and blood and stuff like that. So this is definitely not a movie kids can watch. But basically all this guy basically cares about is getting because he's a pervert, all he cares about is getting a nice shot of a woman on camera. And well, and Jake is basically telling this guy, look, he says, wait a minute, those are my kids. And he basically tells the guy that his mom's a sheriff and that my mom will be upset with me if she finds out about this. So he basically tries to tell the guy, look, we got to go to the island and, you know, go rescue my younger brother and sister. But the guy's being a total jerk and not listening. And well, he gets attacked by piranhas and stuff like that. One thing I will say I do like about the movie, I mean, the best part of the movie is the last 30 minutes where a whole bunch of piranhas are just going on a feeding frenzy and attacking a couple hundred swimmers at the beach, and the police officers played by Elizabeth Sue, Adam Scott, and Ving Rhames are fighting the piranhas off, like when Ving Rhames is using a shotgun on piranhas and then like a propeller blade as like a weapon. Like that was definitely the highlight of the movie. Unfortunately, this movie just wasn't as good as it could have been because, again, Alexandre Aja I do rather like as a director. You know, I think the two best movies Alexandre Aja has directed is The Hills Have Eyes 2006 remake, and then many years after this, he would go on to direct the 2019 killer alligator movie Crawl, which I do rather like that movie. The alligator movie set in Florida with a hurricane about a girl trying to save her dad. I actually rather like that movie. I should probably review that this October. And another thing I think hurt this movie did suffer a lot of production problems, and the Weinstein Company was involved, which I really think that did hurt this movie. But, okay, but are there any positives I have for the movie? But in terms of negatives, this movie does not have the best character writing. There's a lot of bad CGI. Like, I think some of the characters come across as really unlikable. I feel like this movie's a lot of style over substance, and the whole ending I'm not a fan of. But are there any positives? Yes. Like I said, I do think this movie does have a good cast, even if some of the characters are not the best written. While there is a lot of bad CGI, when the practical effects are there, the practical effects are good. This movie does have a good soundtrack. The opening scene of the movie is not bad. And my final positive is that I do think that there is one tension-filled scene involving people climbing over a rope with piranhas. Like, that's not a bad tension-filled scene. But other than that, Piranha 3D from 2010 is a mixed bag of a film at best and very mediocre. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to give Piranha 3D a 5.5 out of 10. So, yeah. Anyways, guys, that was episode 12 of Halloween Horror Movie Review Season 1. And, yeah, we'll catch you guys for the next review. Later.